Welcome to City Council. Call the meeting to order. Please have confirmation of the posting. Roll call, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you. The agenda was posted in accordance with Nevada Open Meeting Law, and all members are present.
Thank you very much. Because this is a special meeting, we will go right to public comment. Is there anyone wishing to give public comment at this time if they come forward, or if they want to call in at 702-589-9629, they can do that? Or is there any written comments?
No written comments were submitted.
Okay. All of those who are interested can rush to the podium. Seeing no one on the phone and no one coming forward, we'll go right to the special agenda. Item number 1 for possible action is presentation, discussion, and staff directive regarding the 2023-2024 general fund and other governmental funds and proprietary fund operations and maintenance budgets. Mr. City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Taylor Tedder, your city manager here. So today you are considering the city manager's recommended budget for financial year 2024. And I did want to just briefly mention the 5 different substantial changes in this budget. So the first thing that I'd like to mention is a new position for a tree technician. The other new position that I put in this budget was an assistant city manager position. The third substantial change is the minimum wage increase and increased costs of labor due to collective bargaining. The fourth item is the National Park Service collaborative agreement for our dispatch operation with public safety. And then I believe the fifth substantial change is fire captain funding for the new fire substation that will be constructed in this next year. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Mannanen, our acting budget director, acting finance director, sorry, and she will walk you through the changes, and this will be more of a collaborative process this year. So each of the department heads will come up and answer any questions about their department or their budget and give you a very brief 1-minute overview of their department efforts. So Angela?
Thank you, Ms. Miniman.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome to this year's special budget meeting. So let's start with what is a budget. So a budget is a fiscal plan setting out anticipated revenue and expenditures for accomplishing a variety of services over a given period of time. A budget is not cash. In order for money to be spent in a fiscal year, it has to be included in the budget. An operating budget is expenditures over the current period, and capital budget is the financial plan for long-term capital improvements, facilities, and equipment. So the budget process starts with the preparation, the expense estimates for departments in light of available revenues, and then it's the approval process with the City Council, and then it'll eventually be submitted to the State of Nevada Department of Taxation. Then implementation, and then throughout the year, evaluation and audit, where the performance is monitored and measured throughout the year. So the goals for today's meeting is to present a clear picture to the residents and council and staff regarding the city's financial direction, present summaries of revenues and expenditures, including personnel costs, provide an overview and summary of all the city's funds, request direction on the operations budget from council. And this is an operations and maintenance budget meeting, so discussion of CIP improvement projects will only be discussed as funding. So projected revenue assumptions. So again, the revenue assumptions for fiscal year 24 continue to be fiscally conservative. We're not going to budget for a revenue we're uncertain of. Consolidated tax for the current budget in '24 is $15 million. This is up from the fiscal year original projection of 13.7 million. And actually, since last year's budget, it's actually, fiscal year '23 is probably gonna come in at 14.5 million, which is really good for the city. Property tax revenue for fiscal year '24 is $2 million, which is relatively flat. It's very similar to prior years. We have about a 500,000 in abatement taxes that will eventually come on, but as property tax only can increase 3% a year for residents, it takes a long time to come into revenue. The solar lease revenues remain stable with increasing contractual rate increases. This is the general fund.
If I could interrupt you and see if
Mhm.
we have a city manager can figure out how to make it cooler in here.
Oh.
And I give permission to anybody in here who would like to take off their jacket.
Mr. Mayor, I can do it from my phone.
Ooh.
Don't gloat.
Okay.
Go ahead, thank you.
Nice. Okay, so starting with the general fund sources summary. So as you can see, 21 and 22 are the actual revenues for the general fund. And they came in at 41 million in 2021, which included 1.5 million of the CARES money, which is one-time money. And then fiscal year 22, it came in at 41.6 million. The budget for fiscal year 23 is much higher at $47 million, and that's because there's almost $10 million of ARPA money in there. And currently, we've already received $26.9 million this year. The revenue budgeted for fiscal year '24 is $38.2 million. So, starting with the large green circle, that's the intergovernmental. So that's $15.4 million. 15 million of which is the consolidated tax. And then I'm gonna go counterclockwise. That little tiny blue sliver up at the top is the miscellaneous revenue, and it's about 100,000, and that does not include interest revenue, as we lost 100,000 back in fiscal year 22 due to the market. But it's looking much better now. Fiscal year 23, we currently have 474,000 in interest revenue we've collected only in the general fund. And then fines and forfeitures, which is about 1% of the revenue for the general fund, is 400,000. Licenses and permits is 3% at 1.5 million. And taxes at 6% is 2.4 million, 2 million being property taxes and 4 million being room tax. That yellow-orange slice is the charge for services, which is about 12.6%, and it's 4.8 million. Of that, 3.8 million is all coming from our golf courses. And so we did increase the green fees we increased the revenue expectations for fiscal year 24 for the golf courses, for 400,000 at Boulder Creek and 300,000 for the municipal golf course. The large blue slice is our rents and royalties. So 13.2 million of that is our 70% allocation from the lease revenue. And the other 300,000 in that blue slice is our just other payment options, such as payments in lieu of taxes. So talking about lease revenue, fiscal year 24 is going to be about $18.9 million in total lease revenue. And like I said, 70% will go to the general fund, which is $13.2 million. 10% will go to support our special revenue funds. And so that of 1.8 million, which will be a little over $1 million going to our VERF fund, which is our vehicle equipment replacement fund. 208,000 will go to our extraordinary maintenance fund. And 208,000 will go to all the other funds as well. The risk management, compensated absences, and revenue stabilization. And then 20% goes to our voter-approved CIP, which is $3.7 million. So currently, we only have approval to spend $1 million out of voter-approved CIP a year. So it grows at about $2 million annually, and it's projected to be about $20 million at the end of fiscal year 24. These are our special reserve funds. that are supported with our lease revenue. The first one on here is our Revenue Stabilization Fund, has about $2.8 million in it, with a cap of $3.2 million. This cap is set by NRS, and it can only be 10% of the prior year's expenses. And this revenue source would be used in case of emergency where the city's revenues drop more than 10% in a given year. We could use this funding to assist with supporting payroll and other options. The next one is the risk management. It currently has $3.4 million in it with a cap of 9.2. So this risk management is things like litigation. It also pays for the city's insurance. The one in the middle is the compensated absences. It has about $2.5 million in it with a cap of $3.5 million. And the cap is the current city's liability for accrual payouts. So this fund comes in very handy when people retire, especially if they've been here a very long time, because their accrual balances have grown. We've had payouts over $200,000. So in the past, when people would retire after a long time, we'd have to freeze positions, and it would be detrimental to departments because they couldn't have someone come in and replace this person. So it really assists the city to keep moving by having this fund. The next one is extraordinary maintenance, which has $3.8 million in it for just emergency capital improvement. The lighter blue, has another $3.8 million, which is set aside for the pool. So that was excess revenues from the general fund that was moved over here to hopefully eventually build our pool. And that has a cap of $9.2 million, which is 5% of governmental assets, and that's due to NRS. The final special revenue fund here is our VERF. It has $2.6 million in it after the liabilities of cars that are currently ordered, or vehicles, not just cars. And it has a cap of $9.2 million. So the budgeted revenues for the general fund are $38.2 million. And our budgeted expenses are $45.4 million. We have $3,660,000 transferring to acquisition improvements, which is to support our capital improvement projects. We also have budgeted $1,198,011 for contingency. The use of fund balance, not including transfers and contingency, is $2,368,317, which is consistent with prior year budgets. So even though we only have $38 million in revenue coming in, and we have budgeted $45 million in expenses, our budget still balances because we have a fund balance sitting in the general fund to assist with this. And this is typically what we've done in the past, as long as I've been here. And it's just because we're conservative on our revenue, we're conservative on our expenses. Our budget's purpose is just to make sure that we have enough money for the things we plan for within the year. And then the NRS also wants to make sure we maintain a 1 to 2 month fund balance, which is 8.33% to 16.66%. Even with using the fund balance for this budget, we're still at almost 26% of operating costs in our general fund. So the general fund is not depleting, even though we're using fund balance, potentially. So the general fund expenditures by function. The expenditures budgeted currently are $45.5 million, as I said, and about 64% of this is salaries. The largest green slice in here is public safety, which is 36%. It's $16.8 million, and their budget is very interesting, as over 80% of their budget is actually salaries and benefits. The blue is Parks and Rec, at $7.1 million, is 16%, and $4 million of that is the golf courses. Public Works, which is that yellow slice, is 14% at 7.2, and general government is 13.5% at 6.1 million. The other financing at 11% is 4.8 million, which is our 3.6 that transfers out to support our capital improvement projects, and the $1.2 million contingency that will only be used with council's permission if needed. But in the past, we have not spent, so it just stays in the fund balance. Planning and development is 4.8% at 1.9 million, and the municipal court is 3% at 1.2 million. So high-level changes, as Taylor kind of went over just a moment ago. Public Works, we're adding the tree tech. We had a tree tech requested to be brought in-house as the cost of tree service continue to escalate. This request will offset by bringing in services in-house and will be budget neutral. Parks and Recreation, the state minimum tax will go, the state minimum tax rate goes up to $11.25 effective July 1st. The city plans to bring all positions up to $12 for employee retention. This hopefully will help our part-time employees. The annual golf course management and maintenance contracts also increased by contractual CPI. This is $116,000 for the Boulder Creek course and $65,000 for the municipal golf course. Boulder BCTV is requesting reclassification of the graphic designer, web designer to a media coordinator. This will help with reaching out to the community and has a cost of about $10,000. The IT department changes are just contractual increases, and also there's an increase in the maintenance equipment of $90,000 to replace switches, which will just be a one-time fee. The police department, there are new ARPA projects for fiscal year '24, which is why if you look at the equipment, it looks like it's dropping $191,000. We are not cutting their budget, it's just those projects have been completed. Animal control funding has been added for a part-time position. This position was actually created in fiscal year '23, but it wasn't yet funded. The dispatch budget includes $123,000 for a possible space partnership with the National Park Service. And this will hopefully assist our dispatch. The fire department, there's funding for working out of class for a potential of 3 firefighters or fire engineers to work as fire captains. There's an additional operating cost for the additional fire substation. And due to supply chain demands and builder constraints, the construction of the new fire substation may occur later in the budget year than positions would require. Community development, big changes are, the budget was reduced due to a reduction in solar permit costs. So there's no solar projects planned to go online, and so they don't need to budget for the expenses. New grants are $100,000 for a potential Main Street program in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. This would be a state program that would promote things such as shop local. Increased funding of the Boulder City Historical Association increased $40,000 to $105,000. And the Senior Center grant increased $20,000 just with their annual CPI adjustment. Municipal court changes was we moved professional funding to salaries and benefits for a full-time marshal position. And this is to address the increased court sessions with unfunded mandates. The city clerk has professional fees of $500,000 included to update the city code. Fiscal year '23, the RFP, the candidate could not follow through on their commitment due to a conflict of interest discovered after the successful submittal. And as this is an operating cost, it has to be rebudgeted. And so this is an example where we had the expense in fiscal year '23, the $500,000, even though it's in our expenses for '23, we're not going to spend it. So it's going to stay in the fund balance. So this is an example where expenses come in less than expected. The city manager has also requested the creation of an assistant city manager. This position would assist with the 10 department heads that report directly to the city manager. And it would spread out supervision duties and would allow for more time spent on the big picture and excellence of the organization. So to summarize the governmental funds, all the fund balances are positive with operational reserves as required. There is a transfer from the general fund to the acquisition improvements fund of $3.6 million, and there's also a transfer from the voter-approved capital improvement fund of $1 million. And I'm happy to answer any questions before the departments get up and talk about their individual departments.
Any questions? Okay. Councilman Walton.
I had the question earlier, and we needed a little research, but we refer to the CPI adjustment several times in here. Were we able to determine which of the CPI indexes that are used?
That's a good question. It varies by contract. Some of them use the Western, some of them just use the national. It varies. It depends on how it was written in the contract. So when that contract was written. Does that work for us to have a variety of CPI indices that we use, or do we want to
standardize those as we come to the termination and rewriting of our contracts or leases, or?
And we have been, and we've been moving to always using the month September as the CPI increase month. So we have been moving towards making them all uniform, but it's just as the contracts come up, that we are aiming towards that.
So CPI West,
Yeah.
CPI, okay.
It's,
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir, it would be the CPI West Class B. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll have the department folks come up one at a time. And I think we have Public Works first.
Good afternoon. First, I want you to know that everything I'm going to tell you is the truth. Second, it is fair to all concerned. Third, we're always building goodwill and friendships. And fourth, it's definitely beneficial to all concerned. So, brief overview. We have multiple divisions: admin, engineering, streets, building maintenance, and landscape. Our goal is really to enhance the quality of life of the community by planning, designing, constructing, maintaining public infrastructure. Facilities, roads, flood control, CIP projects, and landscaping. We do that from funding inside, but we also use resources available to us through outside sources like Regional Transportation Commission and Regional Flood Control. One of the big keys we try to drive home within our department is we want to be transparent. We want to deliver a great product. We want to be efficient, effective, and always deliver a smile to our community. So I'm here for any questions.
Are you going to be getting the tree trimming service? Is that under your department? Are you
Tree
under-
trimming is under mine, yes, correct.
Okay. So do we have the capabilities of having staff run that truck and operate it?
The bucket truck for up and down, yes. Yeah, we
So-
currently utilize the bucket truck.
So are we going to have to bring any more employees in to be able to trim the trees, do we see?
So the goal is to try to hire within and train staff. We have a selection of staff that are interested,
Okay.
and then we would have to backfill the position.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
And move on to Parks and Rec.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, for the record, Roger Hall, your Parks and Recreation Director. So Parks and Recreation, the Parks and Rec Department is a service provided by local governments to benefit their communities and improve residents' quality of life. The department organizes programs, sports, classes, and participants. I think our youngest one was 6 months old to over 100 years of age, and it's not Mayor Hardy. So the department is responsible for cleaning and sanitizing over 100,000 square foot of city facilities, including the police department, public works, parks and rec, and then you throw in 17 parks and 24 sets of restrooms, and we had a quiz on that when we were briefing city council, and most of you got it right. The department coordinates community special events permits. We have a ton of special events in our town, facility rentals and film shoots. We oversee 13 budgets, including 2 golf courses totaling over $7 million. The department has 10 full-time staff members and approximately 80 part-time staff members. That includes instructors, lifeguards, cashiers, gym supervisors, sports staff, that type of thing. And the department contributes over $4.6 million to the general fund last year. So that's the end of my report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Councilwoman Jorgensen.
Thank you. I just recognize it said monies must be included in the budget to be spent. And just making sure that another responsibility that you have, which is a wide variety of responsibilities, is Bootleg Canyon. And I know that we had discussed that for safety and enjoyment and making sure that it has the opportunity to bring people in for economic reasons too, not just for the city, but also for the city at large, not the fiscal city. I know that that was increased. Does it have to be visual for us to see that, or is that understood?
So in this budget, it keeps the funding for Bootleg Canyon currently at the about $5,000 that it is currently being maintained at. However, the acting finance director and I recently took a look at it, and we can, in this current budget, move about $20,000 to supplement that line to bring in about $25,000. So in your motion today, we can include that as a change and accomplish greater maintenance of the Bootleg Canyon trails.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'll just continue with that thought. Do we know how much we'll need an increase in that? So when we give a motion or talk about in detail what we're looking at?
Well, right now, we have one part-time person that we have hired, and he has a full-time job. So the amount of time that he currently spends up at Bootleg Canyon is not very much, except for when he goes up there on big special events and make sure that they're operating on the same track and, you know, that type of thing for special events. What we'd like to do is hire additional part-time people at 19 hours a week to supplement the maintenance of the trails. We have large special events up there, and they do take a toll on the trails. So we need, this person was one of the original trail builders when we had Bootleg Canyon, and we used to have a full-time person for 40 hours a week up there at Bootleg Canyon. But due to budget constraints and COVID and so forth, it's down to $5,000 a year. So this will really help getting some part-time staff up there.
I'm looking for a number.
I don't have a number for you because this is a surprise. So,
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So the $20,000 that we could move in would probably be adjusted by the Parks and Rec to see what they could use.
Correct. So that would be in addition to what's currently been budgeted the last 3 years. So it will be a big jump start on additional personnel for the part-time time that would be spent out there to continue maintenance of the trails.
Councilwoman.
Thank you. So would this be an ongoing or a one-time?
Well, that would be up to you next year. If you want it to continue to be ongoing, it is in the operating budget, so that would be what's budgeted this year. And then next year we could continue that. We could see how it went, if we need more, if we need less, definitely.
Okay, great, thank you.
In as much as this is a 5-year plan that we're looking at, the intention would probably be to continue that then.
Right, so the CIP is a 5-year plan. This operating budget is just for financial year '24. So every year you consider the operating budget for the next year period. So definitely it would I wouldn't foresee it going down unless we somehow were able to improve every trail to a high standard.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Hall?
Thank you.
Thank you. Community development?
Good afternoon, Mayor Hardy, members of City Council. Michael Mays, your Community Development Director. We wanted to highlight for you the department goals for fiscal year '24. And the first is continued effort to strive toward improving customer service. As you know, we're currently working on the implementation of new software called CityWorks that will be in effect by July 1. This software is going to help with improving the response time with our building permit review process. I also want to note this is a multi-department effort. And to that end, I want to give a special thanks to Skip Spellman with the Utilities Department, who is the project manager for implementation of CityWorks, working with community development, utilities, public works, and the fire department for successful implementation. It's also important that in helping support our residents and businesses that we improve transparency and usability of our forms, access to the website, to make it easier for people to conduct business with Boulder City. And we also want to highlight the completion of the Economic Development Plan within fiscal year '24. We have been working on the action items within this plan for the last several years, being led by our Economic Development Coordinator, and so that will be complete within the next fiscal year. We operate with 6.5 employees, and as you can see with the org chart on the screen, we're always looking for ways to leverage the personnel resources when it makes sense to go to third party, as we do with inspections. That's what we do. Again, being efficient and being responsive to our community. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. And we'll go to communications. Ms. LaPlante, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor Hardy and Council. Under the Office of the City Manager, the Communications Division and BCTV includes 3 full-time employees, myself, Holly Webb, and Carly Poindexter. The division ensures transparency. I would say the work that we do is critical both internally and externally. Department directors and their deputies often call upon my staff to help get messages out regarding projects, which not only keeps our residents well informed, but also reduces misinformation. The staff works to simplify the availability of information, working with local media, posting information online and on social platforms. They're currently working on a review and redesign of the city's website. The staff is responsible for production of videos broadcast on BCTV, as well as the live stream that is going on right now of this meeting and all of the meetings that are public here in City Council chambers. As a matter of fact, I should point out that 84 meetings were done in 2022, which is about 8 shorter than our record year, which was the year before. In July 2022, Carly was moved from a part-time role to a full-time role. Her stellar work and knowledge have been a true benefit to the community. She's been able to put together videos. She actually is the mastermind of our Tedder Talks, which have been a real hit for folks. And I've recognized that her ability should be taken to the next level, and that's why I'm requesting the move to a different position. Any questions?
Any questions?
And what is
Councilwoman
the
Booth.
cost going to be on this?
I believe between $10,000 and $15,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Administrative services. Go ahead, Mr. Bolt.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bolt, Administrative Services Director, and I'm proud to have 3 divisions under my span of responsibility, to include personnel, which has 2 full-time employees. That responsibility is really from cradle to grave, so it's recruitment to retirement and everything in between. I've got information technology falls under me. That's 1 full-time employee, in addition to the managed services that we subscribe to. And then the airport, where we have 4 full-time employees trying to ensure that the airport's operated and maintained in a safe and serviceable condition. So really this department has a good number of internal customers, external customers, and really what our mantra is to follow up and provide good customer service through responsiveness and follow-up. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
think we have our fire department. Please proceed, Mr. Gray.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Obviously, the fire department, we provide fire and EMS support. So the last few years, we've really been working on trying to strengthen our hazardous material and tech rescue response as well with all of the rural recreation. Another focus we've been doing is our community risk reduction with the AED program, and there's some other programs we're working on to try to reduce some of the risk. We currently have 26 full-time employees, 3 reserve battalion chiefs, 9 reserve firefighters, and we have 9 cadets in our academy. We started with 20 and we're down to 9, so we're hoping to keep them in there, but we'll just see how that works out. We're also working on designing the new station 122. Last time we met with them, they're still saying they think they can have it done by end of December, so we're still optimistic, but we'll see how that goes, once they start digging holes. And so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead. For the record, he has no questions. Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, I think we skipped over the police department, so if we could do them next.
Only if they choose to come up and report. Please.
Good afternoon, I'm Tim Shea, I'm the Chief of Police. I put up our organization chart. You can see we have quite a number of operations going on continuously. We're one of 2 departments in the city. We are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day, every hour, every week, and have been since 1931, as best we can tell. So that's what we're broken down. Our job, of course, is preserve the peace, protect life and property. We have one of the lowest crime rates, not only in the state, but in the country. Our response times are amazing. For the recent phony school shooting, we had people on site moving into the school in 24 seconds. Unheard of anywhere else. So we have about 85 total employees, including part-time. And, positions. We don't have the employees, as all of us in this business are finding. It's very, very difficult to replace people. We've been trying to hire, for example, a dispatcher for 6 months. And it's very, very difficult. So we're in a very competitive market, but we work in a very fine environment, which is a good recruiting tool for us. And the city takes very good care of its employees, which is also a very good recruiting tool for us. So our lateral numbers are high. And one of our emphasis now is I'm trying to increase the number of women. We have the only female in the Henderson Academy right now, and if things work out right, we'll have another one in May. So it's one of the areas we're deficient in. And if you have any questions, here I am.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just taking note that Chief Shea said that he's been here since 1931.
Yeah.
And duly noted.
So no wonder
I
he
feel
was,
like that today too, believe me.
no wonder he was so slow to come up to the microphone. So will we find it enhanced recruiting ability if we partner with the Park Service, for instance? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's been a long ongoing program. First came about through just a discussion with 2 chiefs ago, looking at a way to, we have no backup dispatching system. What happened is we had a fire in the police department, and the dispatcher, I'm brand new here, and I'm looking for the alternate dispatch site. We don't have one. The alternate dispatch site was a dispatcher standing on the front of the police department with a portable radio in her hand, waiting for a patrol car to show up so she could sit in it to handle all the emergency calls. We transferred telephones to Henderson, and then they would notify us they had a call for us. So I started looking for a backup dispatching system. Over time, that's evolved to the ability to us to work out of that modern facility and the mutual benefit of both organizations, because both of us are hurting for people. And if we can mutually support each other, we can get a lot more out of what we have. Frequently, we only have 1 person working over there. They only have 1 person working. So we would now have minimum 2 people working, which benefits both of us. That's where this kind of came from. Plus, we're required to keep our current dispatch operations operational, so that if they have a problem in their facility, if this all works out, we can all move back to ours. Well, when we're doing the upgrades and the renovation that's in the capital improvement, they've got to go somewhere to work. So we've got everything all set up there to operate out of there. It's a much better working environment for our employees. It allows things where they actually could go to a lunchroom and eat rather than eating at their council for 12 hours a day. They don't have to leave all the doors open to go to the ladies' room like they do now. They would actually be able to go do something like that. So for a working environment, plus the partnership with the Park Service is a very good thing for all of us. It's been a partnership with the city since, what, 1930, 31? And it's a benefit for all of us. And the numbers they came up to, it's not a cost savings, but it just enhances our operations, and it makes it easier for us, I believe, to recruit, because we have a modern, up-to-date working environment for the employees versus what we have now.
Thank you very much.
Long answer for a short question.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll move to municipal court. Oh, we have a question.
I'm sorry. Where will they dispatch it? Park Service in the same spot, or have they developed a new area? Or would they be dispatching?
They would be in the Park Service facility, which is right off of Boulder City Parkway. You go down the hill, just past Albertsons off to the left. They have a facility up there. So they just be down the street.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So do we see this as a long-term facility change? Because you said something about upgrading what we have at the police department currently. So, or do we see this just as an interim while we are upgrading? Or should we put our resources to upgrading something there? These are my questions.
Yeah, no, all the facilities, all the work that has to be done there is all done by the federal government. It's their facility. We have 2 council stations that would work for us. We've already tested them, we've used them. We've gone up there and used them as though our system was, something had happened, and we moved our dispatchers up there to make sure we could operate out of there. So this was looked upon first as a backup, then it moved to a temporary, and then it moved to, this would be a permanent primary dispatch thing. Then if something happened at their facility and both entities had to move, we'd both come back here and move. But this building space is at a premium, so we wanted to do some remodeling to move the current dispatch area to a back area where it should be really, and then make better use of the area they're in and do some reconfiguration up there on the 2nd floor. So the contract requires we keep the dispatch area functioning at the police department, so there's a backup for both agencies.
Great, that's what I was kind of asking, because I do know that you guys are filled to the brim, and that space could be utilized, and if it was backup, I didn't know if we had to keep that entire space as the functioning space, or if there was an option for something when it's a backup to be a little bit smaller.
No, it'll be about the same size. It'll be where the volunteers are right now, and the volunteers will move to a different area, and then records will move across, and the volunteers will and code enforcement officer will work out of there. And then we'll turn where records are into a conference room, interview room that we don't have now, and then the current conference room become an office for a lieutenant.
It's like dominoes.
And I'd like to add, so right now, when officers have to meet with a member of the public, there is no public meeting space at the police department, so they end up often meeting on the sidewalk or on the park bench in front of the police station. So this, it's in the capital improvement plan, so it's really not an upgrade of the dispatch center in the police department. It's just moving that to the back, and then it would be a greater use of the space.
Right, yeah, if you could imagine you're a crime victim and you're standing on the sidewalk talking to an officer, people are walking between you and the officer at times, and it just, there's no other place to put them, so. Okey-doke.
Thank you. If no other questions, we'll invite the municipal court up. Go ahead, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I am, for the record, Victor Miller. I'm the municipal court judge for Boulder City. To digress a bit, since I have been here since 1931, sometime I think, when I was a child, the park rangers were the police in Boulder City. So, The court is actually not a department of the city. It's a separate branch of government of the city. But just like the Congress provides the budget for the Supreme Court of the United States, you get to provide the budget for us. And we appreciate that, giving us the resources we need to function as a proper branch of government. We have 9 employees at this court over here. We're in not only a separate branch of government, a separate building. And the proposed budget reflects some changes that have been made by the legislature, some unfunded mandates that they've put on us, particularly 2 that we've dealt with this past year. They've changed minor traffic violations from criminal offenses to civil offenses. And so that has worked out actually very well. That started January 1st. And I think today in a meeting, I think we've received 100 of those civil citations this year. We had the opportunity to brag to our other partners in the state that Boulder City was the first civil citations issued and the first correct civil citations issued, thanks in large part to the training provided by Sergeant Glenn at the police department, who actually looked at the law and prepared the process for the police to write the citations. So that's working well, with the exception of some problems with case management, our case management system, which is being developed by the Supreme Court of the state of Nevada, and so that's an ongoing process. The other unfunded mandate was the requirement that anyone who's arrested needs to see a judge within 48 hours of that arrest. And so that's taken a lot of effort to change a lot of things, because it means basically we're a 24/7 operation now with one judge and 9 employees. We've worked out a system where, because of the hard work of the employees, we don't have to work on Sundays, but we do have to work on Saturdays and every other day of the week to do those hearings for those individuals. And so that required some additional staff, which in the budget provides, and we appreciate that, and we're dealing with that. One of the things that we didn't provide or talk about that I'd like to maybe throw my bit out, that now that I'm working every Saturday, well, let me not say I have to be available every Saturday. I think that as we looked this morning, there are, between last July 1st and now, there have been about 20 Saturdays that we've had to have hearings. Brittany knows, she was there. And 5 holidays that we've had to, Christmas Day, if they've been in for 48 hours, we've got to come down and be there. So it's a kind of a burden on a person to have that. And so where I'm getting to is back in March, last year, March 28th of 22, the council did evaluations for the other 3 appointed positions in the city. And at that time, each of those individuals received, as I look back, looks like an 8% raise. But since you do not do an evaluation of me being a separate branch of government, I was kind of left out of that process and haven't had a change of salary since that time, or since a few years before that. So what I would like and request, if you would consider this extra time and that am now putting in, and also the cost of living, which has changed during that time, and consider increasing my salary. So with that, my request additionally would be that if there is an increase, that it be retroactive to the first of this 23 fiscal year. And there is money to do that because of, we took some ARPA money, was put in for these unfunded mandates that's still available to do that. Now, you'll have to probably talk to other staff about whether that's appropriate to do that in this budget, or if there has to be a separate resolution. I'm not quite sure about that, but.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
So, obviously, the question is, are you still married?
Yes.
I mean, it may sound in jest, but that's hard position to be in every single weekend. And so do we have a substitute judge available at times, or a substitute city attorney at times?
There is, we can call in you have to arrange ahead of time, so, but I think one occasion since this started, I've had to have a substitute judge come in, yes.
So does that, if I may follow up, does that judge then get paid out of your salary, or does that judge get paid out of the city salaries?
He gets paid out of the city salaries, out of the, in our budget, it's called professional services.
So, in essence, whether we pay you or someone else or you has to be there every time, but we don't pay you extra for doing something that the professional services other judge would do if you weren't there.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or observations?
I have a question.
Councilwoman Booth?
My question is, so we don't have any jails over there? So if somebody gets arrested, they bring them back to Boulder City?
No, good question. They go to Henderson. There's a contract, excuse me, with the Henderson jail, and they're taken there, and we have a video link so they appear for these hearings over the video link.
Okay.
And so it's called the process, or the program is called Blue Jeans. It's like Zoom, and so I can do them. In fact, I do often do them through Blue Jeans from home rather than coming up and doing that. The problem or concern is if I'm up on the mountain fishing, there's no service, and then I'm not able to cover it. So and that was the situation where we had the substitute judge come in, because I was with a group of young men camping on top of Mount Charleston, and there's no service, and was not able to cover my hearing.
Thank you.
Bet.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Appreciate it. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Now, does that bring us back to the city manager?
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So I don't want to take up too much time regarding the city manager's office, but as you can see, I do have all of the departments report to the city manager, and there are 10 direct reports to the city manager. And as you know, the city clerk and city attorney are also appointed by the governing body, just like my position. And since all three of us will be saving kind of our big accomplishments and about what we do for our evaluation meeting on the 21st, I'll save that for that time. But I did want to say that the city manager is responsible for the 208.8 full-time equivalent employees that we have. And so in this budget, I did recommend the addition of the assistant city manager position. So the best practice for direct reports is typically between 5 and 7 direct reports. I do have 10. The other thing to be able to focus on allowing the organization to be able to be taken to the next level in regard to performance management and organizational excellence. So having someone dedicated to focus on performance management and focusing on some of the other direct reports that could go to them. My general thought is that It would depend on the candidate and their experience. So if they had experience in planning and zoning or public safety or things of that nature, then that would be kind of how it would be restructured to be tailored to their experiences. The other thing in regard to that, it would allow for better resident relations, so there would be more time to focus with residents and continue to provide the support and everything that we do. So I'll take any questions on that item first. There's a couple other things that I wanted to mention.
Questions?
Yes.
Councilwoman Booth?
Okay, I have a little problem with the assistant city manager position. I think it makes us a little top-heavy, where I'd like to see you maybe utilize some of the other employees, directors here at the city, to maybe give them a little more responsibility and a little more pay. And if we gave anybody any assistance right now, I think it should be the staff that's making $10 an hour, which will soon be making $12 an hour, and putting them up to $15, $16 an hour, like McDonald's and like Panda. And the people working with our children, I think, should just be paid at least a minimum of that, of what everybody else is paying, making it more competitive. So I'm not opposed to that, but I just feel like having assistant city manager isn't of the utmost importance to the city, but yet I feel like you could use some help. And I think we have some really capable people sitting right in this room that could help you. So that's my thought on it.
Sure. So my alternative to adding a person would be looking to upgrade an existing director to make them an assistant city manager. So that would depend on who it is. But that would end up, instead of the $190,000 with salary and benefits, that would end up being just a $10,000 to $20,000 increase in expenses, all in for salary and benefits. So that would definitely accomplish a similar, the similar goal of spreading out the direct reports and making sure that we have that extra assistance, but I'm open to other comments.
Councilwoman?
So the 190,000 is what you estimate would be the cost for a total cost, benefits, everything for an assistant city manager?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and if you utilized a different department head, wouldn't we have to fill that department head's position?
No, so I would restructure how the departments are, and that would take ordinance change, changing how that works, and there are some directors that are related to that. So yes, it would be.
So would they have that responsibility in addition to their current position, or would?
Correct. So they would still have some responsibility of the oversight of their department, but there are certain departments that have a second layer, either a deputy or another manager level, that could be given a little bit more responsibility to make it workable.
Thank you.
Councilman?
Just one more.
Okay, Councilwoman?
Do you feel that there is somebody, one of the directors here, that could do this position, or would that be?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Thank you. Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. In relation to the topic of assistant city manager, which I believe that's our topic we're addressing here, I don't know that I have any questions for you per se, but I'll give my comments for council as we consider this option. I do have one question, and that was alluded to earlier. Can a position be created but not funded in a budget cycle?
Yes, you could create a classification. We have a few classifications, I believe, that are currently in our classification listing that are not funded and not filled.
And is the budget cycle the required timing to create those classifications? So now would be the time, then I'm looking at our acting finance director. I'm sorry, I should address you, but that's the timing, right? So if we want to
Correct.
create it, whether we fund it or not right now, we can at least do that and have further discussions about how it would
Correct.
be filled. Okay. So then, thank you. That was the question, a couple questions I had. And then the comment, I think we've realized that as our customers, the citizens, want to interact with City Hall, with their government, oftentimes we aren't able to directly and promptly address issues. And a lot of our people are wearing multiple hats, so to speak, and we've operated on minimal staff. That's been the philosophy, right, for all these years. And I think when we hear the concerns from our customers that there's a lack of responsiveness, oftentimes it may be directly an issue with responsiveness, but it also may be an issue of lack of people to address it, lack of time within staff. And so when we hear a complaint, rather than say they're not responsive, we could also say there's not enough people to address my concern. And I think that's oftentimes the case. And as we strive to be responsive and increase our customer service level and our culture of excellence, that flat requires people, staff hours. Everything in our government requires money and staff hours. And sometimes they're tied together very closely. And so those are my comments that I want the council to hear in considering this, that if we want to increase our level of excellence and customer service, oftentimes it means we need another body. And having supervised people in municipal government, I can empathize with the overtaxing number of people that are direct reports to you. I support the idea of an assistant to our city manager. I think it could look several different ways. We could skin that cat, so to speak. But to take a current director of a department would just continue to compound the problem that our department directors have, which is not enough time and staff to do what they're already tasked with doing. So I'm in support of the idea of finding a model that will work for an assistant city manager and for even the creation of the position at least. And if we choose to fund it or not, we can at least create it and work towards filling it and funding it and creating the model of what it'll look like in the future. So, Mr. Mayor, those are my comments and questions.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mr. City Manager, and I may have skipped over the city clerk, not on purpose, it's just behind the city manager.
So we're actually saving kind of
Okay.
our exciting information for the 21st.
Okay.
All
right.
three of us, so.
So, trying not to be excited then, could you reiterate what you felt when you gave your initial comments of the specific things that you felt you're looking at that is in our proposed budget, such as the tree tech and dispatch and fire captains? Could you elucidate those again for us?
Sure, so the really high-level systemic changes are, let me grab my sheet.
He's making me feel better because he doesn't remember everything either.
I just don't want to leave off anything important. So the first thing is that tree tech position, the tree technician. So as you know, with Boulder City Tree Service going away, which was really unfortunate, we've had to contract with some other tree trimming companies, and they have been very pricey. So this is one position that would be certified in that area. So we would train additional staff that we already have to work with them to trim the trees ourselves. We already have the bucket trucks, and we have the other personnel that could assist them. So we'd be able to save quite a bit of money related to that. This is very similar to when we added a HVAC technician. So the city was contracting out all of our heating and air conditioning work, and that has saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars, as well as our plumbing technician, our plumber, who was recently named Employee of the Year for single-handedly keeping our pool running. So the second thing is that creation of an assistant city manager position. The third is our minimum wage increase. So we are moving that up ahead of time before the state moves that up. So that is to $12 an hour. It's moved from $10.50. And then the increase in labor costs due to labor negotiations, which there are a few still ongoing with Teamsters Local 14, but we are getting very close to being finished with those and have budgeted accordingly. The fourth item is the dispatch, solving some of our issues with coverage there by partnering with the National Park Service. And then the fifth thing is the work out of class pay for fire captains when the fire substation is constructed. And I believe those are the high level changes. There's all of the small things that you've heard about. A little bit onto Councilman Walton's point about customer service. So one thing that I did, a small thing we included in the city manager's budget was an enterprise license for the professional version of SurveyMonkey, so that we can do professional customer service related emails and reach out to people that touch the city, do business with the city anytime they have an interaction, so that we can learn how we can do better, or maybe they had a concern that wasn't solved and we can help fix that. So trying to continually improve how we're doing business and making sure that we're pleasing our residents, businesses, and visitors.
So, go ahead.
Can I just have monetary amounts, ballpark figures on the high level that you're asking?
Sure. So the assistant city manager position, if that was a new person, it's $190,000, including benefits, PERS, all of that. If that was to be an upgrade of a current director, it would be between $10,000 and $20,000, all in with PERS and insurance benefits, etc. The tree technician, I'm gonna have to have Angela come up here. $120,000 for the tree technician.
At one point, I thought you said it was cost neutral. Is that because of the savings that we would be?
So, on average, Jamie Curry, Public Works Director. On average, over the past 5 years, we've spent roughly $130,000 on tree services. The other thing I forgot to mention is there's been a neglected part of our tree service, which is trimming around utilities. We're struggling trying to find someone who is willing to do so. We've tried to contract it out, we've been turned down. So this would be a part of the training that they would get, is to be able to have the ability to trim around those utilities. So it's 120 is the high end. It's probably figuring more around 85 to 100 roughly. and we would train as needed. Trying to fill the position from outsourced, we'd be probably paying a lot more for someone with the skill set already, because we'd be taking them probably from the private sector. I hope that helps.
I have one question.
Yes.
Yes. When you say 120, does that include benefits, retirement, everything? So that's the total cost
Correct.
of that person coming in?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well,
You're on a roll, Mr. City Manager. I think we're,
So the minimum wage increase, that is $70,000, so that's all part-time employees. And then the actual increase in labor for the total budget with all the contractual labor, that's 2.7 million. And that's the bulk of the increase in our expenses. The solution for dispatch is $123,000.
Sorry, is that ongoing or just one time?
That would be ongoing. And the fire captain's work out of class pay is $72,000. And yeah,
A piece or?
that's total for all three. So because it's a constant staffing position, that is for all, it's 3 people being upgraded, yeah.
and go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, please, the 123 for the dispatch option. Are there other savings that we would realize so the net cost would be lower than the 123?
I think we might save some money on just energy as a whole, from not having all of the equipment running constantly. There's a lot of electronics related to the dispatch center itself. Other than that, I'm not really recruitment savings.
Okay, thank you.
So we would not fill that position that's currently not being filled?
We would be filling the open position that, right, yeah.
If I may, so if we do the dispatch partnership, we would be using our dispatcher as well as their dispatcher and another dispatcher.
Correct. So typically we have 2 working at all times with, sick time and vacation time. Sometimes it does work out that there's only one on the shift, unfortunately. With partnering with the National Park Service, we end up they also have 2 people working. So if we have our people and theirs, and there's a major event, then they would be able to assist us. And we're essentially gaining, the 123 would nearly pay for 1 more dispatch position. So we're essentially gaining 2 for the price of 1 and obtaining a state-of-the-art facility for them to have a higher quality of work life.
And all of these things are within your proposed budget?
Correct.
All of these things being a tree tech, a assistant city manager full-time, a minimum wage increase, the labor costs, the dispatch partnership, and the fire captains, and all of those are in your proposed budget as we're seeing it today.
Correct.
And then, let's pretend we don't think it's, right to have everybody show up on a Saturday, every single Saturday in a row. Has that ever come up in a projection of what that would cost to make that more enticing, or to hire a judge on a every Saturday business? Have we run those numbers?
We can get that to you and definitely have that for the next time you have this in front of you.
Okay. Any other observations?
Mr. Mayor, if I could please. Referring to the judge discussion that we had, I think if I remember can we ask the judge to come up for, answer
Yes.
some questions?
We're the city council, we can do anything.
Thank you.
Judge, please.
So could you please clarify, I thought you divided it into two headings. Essentially, you haven't received a cost of living increase on one hand, and then also brought up the additional weekend hours. Is that accurate?
Well, I did get with the, there was, you passed, I think they passed it, the 3%, the first, yeah, I did get 3% that all non-represented employees got.
Okay, so then is it fair to say the typical increases that the other,
Okay.
would you like to change your answer?
No, there may be some open meeting law considerations, because this,
Separate meeting, okay.
my legal opinion is, we're here for a budget meeting so we can talk about budgets, but I'm gonna defer to your legal counsel, not mine.
I want to see you arm wrestle over this one. Okay, well, then, maybe.
I will be I am on the agenda for the 28th to talk about two items. One is the pro tem judges, a list that you provide per statute every year. And also I have a presentation on that time. Maybe I'll ask the city clerk if we could change that to say presentation and for action, or whatever the magic words are to make that happen,
So, thank you, Judge. So you remember my comments, we can do anything that the clerk allows us to do.
That the clerk allows us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Yep.
Judge. It feels like this is the budget time. I'd like to, explore the budget ramifications here, so I'm not entirely certain how we can proceed with this, because there are some ancillary issues related to that idea of weekend availability that warrants further discussion.
And it can be further discussed, and we can bring those totals to you at the next budget meeting if you like. They're just not included in this budget.
Okay, so you're saying we continue to discuss this?
In general, you can, yes. with
Okay,
the
in
city
general
manager.
then,
Uh-huh.
I will continue. I respect the comment that was made about the additional time. I think if we talk about additional time for a salaried staff member, as the municipal judge is, the police chief, the fire chief, the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk are very often available 24/7. And we can't, I don't think, single out one without discussion of the others. Whether we think that's part of their salary and that's what they do, or whether we want to add a bump to any or all, I think we gotta consider all of them in an equal manner in that way. That's my other comment.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, any other comments?
I have no other comments that I wanted to bring up, other than you'll see on one of the last slides in this presentation is our budget schedule. So this is meeting number 1 for the budget. So this is a great time. If there are changes that you want to make, we can make those and then move forward from there. So next up, Angela will go over this here in a little bit, but you will have additional opportunities to make changes. So like with what we were just discussing, we can get cost estimates to you, we can work on that. Regarding,
So what, if we look at our department recommendation, the city council provides staff direction on a proposed general fund and other governmental funds and proprietary funds, operations and maintenance budgets Do we have anything else on those observations of general fund, government funds, proprietary funds, operation and maintenance that haven't come forward, other than recognizing we're looking at, we've heard that we are having a proposed budget that includes, as I understand it, includes the tree tech, the assistant city manager, the minimum wage, the labor costs going up, the dispatch partnership, and the fire captains, and then parentheses, we're interested in pursuing something that would be appropriate someday, and maybe not today, but looking at delving into what we can do with the municipal court and making sure the people have budgetary support. Is that?
So next, you'll probably want to move on to finance and then utilities for the other funds.
And can I do what we've already done and then move on to those? Or put those out right now? Utility funds, what do you want me to do?
In the past, it's been easier to do all the governmental type funds and the enterprise funds later because they're different. So direction from everything you want to do with the general fund would be appreciated before we go on to utilities. If that makes sense.
Say that clearly. Would you
Sorry.
like me to ask for a motion to do what we've done
Yes.
so far?
Yes, please.
I'm interested in a motion on what we've done so far, in giving staff direction as to what we would want to do. Councilman Fox.
And then, the 20,000 for, Parks and Rec for bootleg, can we throw that in there too?
Definitely.
Good job, good catch. Thank you. And
Mr.
then-
Mayor, can we have a little more discussion to round out what we want the motion to?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so based on my notes, I'll put this to the group and we can hash it out before we make the motion. My notes show that we talked about including in our staff directive an increase in the minimum wage, and we haven't, I'd like to talk about that a little more than we have so far, if we have the time and the place to do that. So I'll set that on the shelf for right now. And the other items were the possibility of giving direction for increased funds for Bootleg Canyon and for discussion or feedback from staff on what a 24/7 or weekend availability bump would be, whatever that instruction might be, or, you know, ask staff to get back with us with some information. And I would like to propose that we consider creating an assistant city manager position, not funding it, and then allowing the city manager time to frame what that might look like. So those are the three, and then the fourth was discussion of increasing minimum wage, which I'd like to ask to open up for further discussion.
Mayor and council, I do want to point out, because this is a budget-focused discussion, the direction should be focused on amounts. Things like creating a classification does have to be separately agendized for direction to do that, just as a aside.
So if I may say, then we can talk about, we've already talked about Bootleg Canyon, $20,000, and we've used a number on that.
Yes.
Which puts us into the budget.
That's right.
And if we looked at, this discussion obviously isn't going to be over today.
Correct.
So we've got a number that we can put in. As far as, and I'm appreciate Councilman's concern. I'm interested, if I'm allowed to give an option to do, number one option, to hire a city manager, assistant city manager at $190,000 a year, or have a current position be augmented if that current position wants to be augmented at $20,000 a year and keep their current position. Can I say that?
As far as the amounts go and which, yes, we can talk about the potential for the $190,000 cost versus the 10 to 20.
So I can say that.
Yes.
So if I if I could say that if I just said that I wanted an assistant manager unfunded, that's no longer in the budget discussion.
Exactly.
So if I said I want an assistant manager, then I have to put a number on it of 190, or have a department head raise his, her hand and say, I would like to take that on, and for $20,000 as an assistant city manager as a title, because I've got a number on it now.
Yes, so in general, the creation of a classification or position would be agendized later. This is just seeking general direction regarding the budgetary amounts. So the comments are completely appropriate for this budget meeting, but with regard to focusing it on amounts and if there's a general direction to want to save for this position or have a assistant city manager classification looked at, then we can bring either back.
So it would be wise to bring back the assistant city manager because of this new creation.
So you would want to include in the budget if you are willing to do that. So I've already developed a job description and things of that nature, have ideas of who that could be. That would come as a separate item if we have funding for it.
Councilwoman?
Does this have to be solidified, this portion of it today, to even consider both of those?
No.
So
No.
could we have before us what it looked like to have a $20,000 and augment someone's current role or change their title with some sense versus a brand new role? Because that's a lot of difference between 20,000 and 199,000. And if I'm looking here correctly at everything we're adding or everything that we've added on so far, I'm somewhere in the 3 point something million. Is that?
It's about 2.8.
The 2.7 increase alone in the negotiations for our labor negotiations that have passed so far, it's at 2.7. So even if we added the 199, that's at 2.9.
In the budget, there's other reductions, so the total from last year is 2.8 million.
But I'm asking currently what's being asked for.
What we're currently being asked for, there was other deductions made in the budget reduced because some of the requests that were being made could be, other things could be cut if there were other people to do these things, like such as the tree tech. The initial cost for the tree tech, there'd be a lot of schooling and things like initially, but our contract costs would go down. Like there's little things in there that offset. That, like, there's little things in everyone's budget that were cuts, like that people said they would give up. And then also like solar lease permits, we don't have to pay for that this year. So the budget had small decreases everywhere, and that's why it's not adding up. But the total increase overall is the 2.8. But you're right, when you're at mentioning everything, it will be higher.
So the 2.8 will be the net increase versus what Councilwoman Jorgensen is talking about. It's more than that, what we're asking for, but it's made up for taking away from Paul because Peter wanted more.
And a good example of that, so if you look at the city manager's budget, it's actually reducing 48,000 over this fiscal year.
Comments?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I really like the way that Mr. Walton's, or Councilmember Walton said it, of looking at what the assistant city go ahead and get that position lined out, but not have to say, I'm for it yet, because I'm not for it yet. I'm more inclined to go along, to me, I'd be more inclined to go along with increasing somebody's wages by 20,000 and maybe hiring 2 customer service reps to come in. That might be even more beneficial. So I would like to see more discussion on what was going to be, the position would be doing, and how is it going to alleviate customer support, that sort of thing. So I really like the way Mr. Walton said it. I would be willing to go along and vote in that direction, because I'm for everything else but that. And the wage for the $12.25 an hour wage.
So if I.
Did that make sense?
It-
No?
It made sense, but I think, as I understand it, this is a budget hearing. And so the budget hearing, we have to talk about a number. So we can't talk about a new position without ascribing to it a number.
Oh, we have to put we do have to put a number to it?
You don't have to today. This will come back before you. We can move on from that if you'd like, and I can develop more information for you, and we can move forward that way. But it's, this will come back before you.
Yes, this direction is sufficient. It doesn't need to be included in the motion.
Okay, so the direction that we're looking at is to do the things that we know we can fund, that we've talked and we've identified an extra thing with Blute Lake Canyon, and then the direction that the council would be interested in could be to include a potential new position or a position that is flexible, looking at the budget and how it does, and then have the administration come back to us with refining this discussion on everything. My next question will be, is there a delay in what we're doing now while we're waiting for this back, or can some of these be included in the budget right now and be approved by council so that we don't have to delay all the other things, like the $12 an hour, for instance, or whatever?
You can provide tentative approval except for the ACM position, if that's how you felt.
And the final approval of the budget is in May.
Okay, so what we do now is not going to influence anything what somebody gets in their paycheck tomorrow or the next day or the next day or
That's
next
correct,
month.
yeah. The final budget is approved in May, and then it wouldn't take place until the next fiscal year.
Okay,
And at that time, we bring forward the classification and compensation schedule for you to also approve, things of that nature.
who would like, unless there's more discussion, I'm ready for someone to cleverly make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a question for clarification. Is this the time or the place where we can discuss the minimum wage amount?
Yes,
Yes.
Fair enough.
I'll let Angela come up and
Okay.
handle those
This-
questions, unless you'd
I
like.
intend this to be just a discussion with council.
Okay.
I don't know that I have a specific question myself right now, so, anecdotally, because I haven't done a survey of all the people that do and used to work here part-time, but if Henderson or Vegas were a farther drive away, their wages might not matter to us. But I think we have a difficult time recruiting and maintaining quality part-time employees, from Safekey to lifeguards to Parks and Rec, other activities, because 10 or 15 minutes away, they're earning $3 an hour more. And hence, our pool is open minimally during the week, and hence we have a minimal amount of space in some of our programs because we can't keep part-time folks here. So I think that's worth discussing. That's important to Boulder City. It's important to the quality of life for our community. And so I'm opening that up and asking for discussion, Mr. Mayor.
Comments? Councilwoman Wood.
I agree 100% that I think that, especially, and I talk about safety a lot because my passion's children, but you have people coming in at $10 an hour right now, supervising our children and our youth and trying to educate them to be better citizens. And I really think if we could keep somebody from not going to Panda Express and keep them there with the children, if they're a good quality person, I think that would be very important to be able to bring this up to. Maybe we don't have to be at the same pay scale as Panda and McDonald's, but we should be close. And I would think like $15 an hour or $15.50, somewhere in there would be, and I don't know how that hits the budget either, but I would think that would be more in line with what life really is out there today.
Councilwoman.
So if we came in and we said our minimum wage is 12 for all employees, that doesn't mean that every employee has to be, that is at minimum wage, does it? That has to be paid, or can we look at our comp study and then change some of those positions within there to have a higher wage?
Yes, we could definitely look at the recommendations in the comp study, how the compensation compares, and if there are certain positions, like if you believe the part-time employees at the pool should make X amount, then that is the compensation and classification listing that will come before you to be approved in May, and we could definitely work on that if that's the council's direction.
How does that affect, however, because I see this is going to be written into the budget. So if we're looking at every minimum wage only being at 12, and then we decide, wait, we can't keep a lifeguard, and we've got to look at Henderson, and Henderson's paying them 17, so maybe we'll pay them 15 or 16, whatever. I'm just throwing out random numbers. I have no idea what they're giving them. And we don't have that allocated because we only have that person allocated at $12 an hour. How does that affect this budget cycle?
So you want to pay them $15 an hour, but they only allocated for $12 an hour?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I see you saying here, okay, minimum wage increase is going to be 12. So if we go in and look at the comps and say, hey, to pay them 12 means we're not going to be able to get someone to be with our children, or, you know, quality people to be with those kind of positions, do we have the funding in there to be able to provide that, because we haven't already voted on that within our budget cycle? Or does the comp study come hand in hand and then we know how much money we need? That's kind of a question.
Well, there's lots of questions there. So for one, right now, our minimum wage, not all our part-time workers make minimum wage. It's just entry level for certain positions, is $10.50. By state law, it's gonna increase to $11.25 effective July 1st. We're proposing what that $70,000 would do, would bring everyone to a minimum of $12, and also people that are above them that are only making a little more than $12 now, bump them up. So when we start talking about minimum wage increases and we start saying $15, it's not just the people that are making $12 or $10 that go up to 15. It's the people that are making $16, $17 and moving them to compensate, because now you have supervisors that could potentially be making less than their employee. So it's a big jump. Like, once we start, it increases quickly. I'm all for it. But the funding, we'd have to find.
Would we be looking at those numbers then within that study?
That study was like 2 years old, and it's what those positions were comparably making that long ago. So we can use it, but it's aged as everything.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at it and bring recommendations. So in your motion, you could say, you know, explore compensation options for minimum wage, and we can bring that back as part of the second budget meeting.
Please.
And I definitely don't mean if we bring somebody in at $15.50 that their supervisor should also get increase also. I wasn't saying that at all. I just thought the bottom line person should be here, and absolutely, if somebody's taking care of our children, and some, like over at Tiny Tots, some of those people have been there for a long time, absolutely, they would deserve to be making more than their employees. So I wasn't saying that at all. I understand that process. That's why I would like to know what would be the cost if you did this amount, and what would be the cost if you did this amount, by maybe increasing the supervisor by the same amount, something like that.
So could we have a motion that approves all of the things that we have put into the proposed budget, such as the tree tech, the assistant city manager of some kind, the minimum wage study, come back and report to us before May so we can make a decision on what we want to do with that. The labor costs, the dispatch partnership, the fire captains, and study the municipal court and study the minimum wage and how it affects us and how we can do something. Is that somewhat where we're going? Making sure we do our $20,000 for Bootleg Canyon?
Mr. Mayor, just for point of clarification, are you suggesting that another meeting come before the council before the adoption of the final budget, which we can do? I just want
Yes.
to clarify. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
So we have the meeting on April 8th already scheduled? Is that the one? Okay. But it's on the city council, right? Okay, I got what you're saying.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I'll take a stab at a motion. Since all those items were already listed in the budget, I'll presume that they're included. In the direction of my motion to proceed with the budget as presented, with the two additions, the comp options for minimum wage and $20,000 additional for increased funding for Bootleg Canyon maintenance.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded, moved and seconded to include in the budget as presented, as well as the comp options to be presented at a April meeting.
May I ask just one
No.
question? Oh.
I'm still looking at the maker of the motion.
I wanted to maybe add to his motion.
No,
Oh.
no, this is his motion.
You're clarifying what,
Yeah, what your motion would be.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your clarification.
So the budget as we presented it, as well as the comp option and the 20,000 for Bootleg Canyon.
That's my motion, with the understanding that the discussion about the 24/7 availability and potential assistant city manager position will come at a different meeting agendized, right? Yes, sir, that's my motion.
Is there a second still?
Correct, yes.
Okay, now there can be discussion.
Does that include also looking at Judge Miller? Or is that,
Yes.
So,
Yes, he just included that.
so that will come back then with that?
it will, as I understand it, that's coming back at a separate meeting agendized specifically for that discussion.
Correct.
So the motion currently on the floor does not include looking at the 24/7 availability.
It's just, that's just going to come
Right.
back. Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Jorgensen.
However, will the city manager position come back at the budget meeting with the discussion on what that's inclusive of for both different ones? We don't have a separate meeting or agenda item for that on a separate meeting. It will come back with
It
the
will
budget?
come back as part of the next budget meeting, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed, say nay. Motion is unanimous. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it. We will now move to number 2 on the agenda, which is our master fee schedule. And
So we haven't gone over utilities yet. If you are, we did all the governmental, so, I mean, I'm sure Joe's fine. Like,
so utilities, and then we also needed to do somebody else. Just Finance.
Oh, well, so it's all the 3 enterprise funds. So it's gonna be the utilities, the airport, and cemetery, and then the fee schedule.
Okay, so pick your one that you would like to go with, and then tell us what it is.
Skipping over finance. Okay, so we're starting with the utility summary. So this shows the last 4 years of revenues and expenses of all the utilities combined. Our operational costs and expenses are relatively flat, or have been. When you see the big spikes, such as in fiscal year '23, where the revenues jump up and the expenses jump up to 52 million, that's due to CIP changes. And the reason the revenues also jumped up is ARPA came into play. Looking at the fiscal year '24 utilities combined budget, there's $32.6 million in revenue, which you can see is lower than the prior 3 years, and that's because there's no additional grant funding coming in fiscal year '24, with the expected expenses of $39.6 million, and of those expenses, 23% of them are all capital. So hopefully you all know, we're currently under a rate study, and at the April 8th meeting, we'll be bringing back CIP changes, such as timeline changes and possibility of 2 new projects, but that'll come at the April 8th meeting once we're further into the rate study. So this is the combined revenue sources for utilities for fiscal year '24, and this is $32.6 million. As you can see, almost all of it is green, so it's almost all charges for services. There's a small 3% that comes from infrastructure sales tax, which is $1.1 million that is used in water for debt or for CIP. So projected revenue assumptions for utilities. Utilities have seen large increases in costs of energy and supplies for capital improvement projects. We're also currently in a utility rate study in progress with Raftellus to assist in determining what revenue changes may be needed in the future. So this is the combined utilities again, expenses by type. The large green section is the cost of purchasing water and power, and that's 40% of the entire budget. Capital is 31%, which also includes depreciation. Salaries and benefits is 17.4%, and repairs and maintenance is 5%. So officially, there's 5 utility funds. There's electric, water, wastewater, and the sanitary, the landfill. And there's also the admin fund, which helps basically support all 4 of the utilities, but not one individually. So what we've changed this year from prior years with the admin fund never had revenue. Now also their expenses are netting to 0. So you'll see an interfund expense coming from the 4 utilities that are supporting it. And that's because whenever you saw reports before, you would see, because it was a transfer in, transfer out, it looks like a revenue and an expense. So it made our utilities look more expensive than they were. So that's a change, and you'll see it in reporting here on April 4th when you see the new charts. The cost for fiscal year '24 for the admin is $3.7 million, which is spread out among the 4 utilities. It includes $1.25 million for the interfund expense to the general fund, which assists with the HR, IT, payroll, accounts receivable, accounts payable, and everyone else that assists the utilities. It also has utility billing, which is $1.1 million budget, which processes all the utility bills. It also has a majority of the city's service fees in it, because the majority of the city's service charges that were charged, the bank fees, is coming from utility billing when people pay with their credit cards. Also in the admin fund is the utility director and any staff that doesn't only work for one department in the utilities. So if they work for all 4 departments, they're included in the utility admin. So now we're going to the electric fund. So if you go back to 2021, there was $19 million in revenue, which is higher than the next year, and that's just due to voter-approved monies transferring into the electric fund to assist with CIP. And also 2021's expenses was $17.3 million, and 7.7 of that was all CIP. The next year, the expenses jump up to $22 million, but 11 million is, again, CIP. Our current year, fiscal year '23, our revenues of expected at 18 million includes $2 million of voter-approved funding, which came from the sale of Track 349. And then the estimated expenses this year is 28 million, and 19 million of that is capital improvement. So fiscal year '24, the revenues expected are 16.7 million with 21.4 million in expenses, and 3.9 of that is capital improvement. So the large cost usually in all our enterprise funds is gonna be the CIP and maintaining them. The electric fund, all revenues come from charge for services. There's no other revenue source for them. This is the expenses for the revenue fund. As you can see, close to 50%, 47%, $9.9 million is just purchasing electricity. 25% is capital, that also includes depreciation, and salary and benefits are 22%. So a big change in the electric fund is the cost of energy has increased from the estimated 7.3 million in '23 to 9.9 million in fiscal year '24. So this is showing high level, the water fund revenues and expenses. And the water fund is the only fund with a unique, $1 million coming in every year with the sales tax. So if you can see the revenues jump in fiscal year '23 to 15.9 million, that's because 3.9 million of that is ARPA funds. And also the expenses jump up to 15.9 million, and that's because we have $5.6 million of current CIP projects. And then in fiscal year '24, the revenues drop down to $12 million, that's because there's no grants coming in. And the expenses go to 13.5 million with 1.1 million in CIP projects. And again, most of the waters fund comes from charge for services, with a small portion, less than 10%, coming from the sales tax that assists them with their debt payment or capital improvement. The water fund expenses are 13.5 million, and of that, that green section is almost 40%, is $5.3 million just purchasing the water. The capital is 38%, which is $1.1 million in capital improvement projects and 2.8 million in the debt payments. That debt payment does include 600,000 for an additional payment to pay off the debt early. And then salaries and benefits are at 16%. And high-level water fund changes was the projected power increased, the cost increased 300,000 from fiscal year '23 to '24 budget. Wastewater. So looking at '23, how it jumps compared to prior years, the revenues go up to 4.4 million, but 2.2 million of that is ARPA funding. And the expenses go up to $5.6 million, but 3.7 million of that is capital improvement projects. And then in fiscal year '24, the revenue comes back down to 2.2 million because there's no grants going in, and 3.1 million in in expenses, which 1.1 million of that is all capital improvement projects. The only revenue source they have is charge for services. And the majority of their expenses is capital. So 56% is the cost for capital improvements. Salaries and benefits are at 26%. And their interfund expense supporting the admin fund is actually 11% of their budget, $375,000. The landfill, the revenues and expenses are very flat because unless there's CIP, there's really no changes in the landfill as the management's contracted out. And there's no grants currently for the landfill, so all the revenue is just charged for services. Looking at the expenses for landfill, total expenses for '24 is $1.4 million. 1.2 million of that is the contract with Boulder Disposal for managing it. And then the next highest one is the 112,000 for the interfund transfer to support the admin fund. And that was all of utilities. Happy to answer any budget questions before Joe comes up, or he can come up.
Any questions?
I have a clarification question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
On the bar graphs of the income and expenses, it appears that many of them are, there's expenses higher than the income, and you mentioned their CIP projects. And those are, from a separate fund. So, well then, do we include the CIP funding in the income bar on that?
The revenue, so
Yeah.
So the enterprise funds are different than like the general fund and our
Right.
CIP where we have a separate fund for it. The enterprise funds, they have to be combined because has to be treated like a business, so you have to make sure your operations, that you can afford your CIP and things like that. And so the reason the expenses jump when CIP happens is you're hoping you have years that you have extra revenue, so you can build up a fund balance when you do your CIP projects, that's where it comes from. So
So we've got fund balance there, and that's what we're
using.
That's why we're able to
Mhm.
operate a little bit upside down right
Yeah.
now in those. And so how long is that fund balance gonna last?
That's why we're in a rate study. So
Okay, thank you. Say that one more time.
that's why we're in a rate study.
That's what I asked, yeah. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we'll go to Mr. Stubitz.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Joe Stubitz, your Utilities Director. Just to give you an overview of the department, as Ms. Mannon has mentioned, we've got 4 separate enterprise funds within the utility: electric, water, wastewater, and sanitary landfill. You know, with that, we've got over 8,000 customer meters for electric, 11 total employees. Water, wastewater, we've got over 6,000 customer meters. And then with the administration, we offer, you know, secretarial, analytical, supervisory, control, and data acquisition, engineering support across the utilities. We have 5 individuals. That doesn't include utility billing. And the landfill is it's permitted for over 150 acres, and it's designed for a life past the year of 2166. And that's managed by a contractor, Boulder City Disposal. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget request, if
Thank
you have
you.
any.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I just had a question regarding cost of electricity, because that was where the largest jump for us happened, besides the CIP that we already have monies for. How much exactly do we get of our electricity, say percentage-wise, from the dam?
Annually, it's about a third. So it kind of depends on what time of the year that we're in. We've got several power purchase agreements. When you say the dam, we've got Hoover, we've got Glen Canyon, we've got 8 other federal hydro facilities. We lump them all into one kind of federal hydro aggregate. And that's not a fixed cost, but it's traditionally our lowest cost. It's under $30 a megawatt hour. For the other resource we've got, Townsite Solar, that's a 5 megawatt throughout the year except for April, March, and off-peak in November. And that's a fixed cost. That's $39.95 a megawatt hour. And then everything beyond that is purchased out in the open market.
Which is what percentage?
This last fiscal year was 24% was our market purchases.
And that usually purchases out at what cost?
That varies, depends on the market. We had high winter costs of above $100 megawatt hour, and then in some cases on the spot market in the summertime, you can see it over $1,000 if you're not scheduling appropriately.
And the increase is, how much would you say that you've seen in the last year or two?
Well, this particular fiscal year, we're estimated at $7.3 million for the year. I mean, that's actually going to be short, well short. It's projected that this fiscal year will be over $11 million needed for the wholesale electricity. You know, we're working quarterly with the Silver State Energy Association, and thankfully our predecessors have kind of prepared for that, so there's fund balance that they have that's able to, that was funds set aside by City of Boulder City as well as SNWA to accommodate for drastic market changes.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Stubitz.
Thank you.
Airport Fund.
So the airport fund, again, is an enterprise fund, so it jumps when CIP happens. If you can see in fiscal year '23, it went to $14.8 million in revenues, and almost a good portion of that is FAA funding. 11 million of that was just from the tower, which is postponed. And then the $16.3 million in expenses, that's just due to CIP. Again, in fiscal year '24, where it's $4.9 million in revenues, only about $1 million is operation revenues. The rest is all grants because of so many CIP projects currently happening at the airport, with $6.7 million in expenses. The airport is very unique that they receive FAA funding for their CIP projects, which is amazing because on some projects they'll pay 100%, and typically other projects they'll pay 90%, and then they'll also pay almost 94%. So the airport luckily has that resource. So revenues for the airport, the intergovernmental is 84%, so that's all just FAA funding coming to support the capital improvement projects. The other one, rents and royalties, is $782,000 for a total of $4.9 million. Expenses at the airport, the very large green piece of the pie is 80%, is all capital, so it's a total of $5.4 million. 4.4 is new projects, and 1 million is depreciation. Their total salaries is only 6% of their budget, and professional services is just under 5. So changes in the airport budget, increased hangar maintenance and possibility of hangars needing more maintenance, and also reclassifying an airport operation agent to an airport maintenance worker, which is more along what they're currently doing. And that is pretty much the airport.
Any questions? We'll go to the cemetery fund.
So the cemetery fund is usually relatively the same. It brings in about $200,000 in revenue and has about $100,000 in expenses. We began some CIP projects in fiscal year '23, and that's why you see the expenses increasing. In fiscal year '24, the expenses increase up to $291,000, and this is $100,000 for maintenance of the grounds, and also $50,000 for a CIP project for the landscaping at the entrance. And the majority of the revenue that comes to the cemetery is all charged for services. The miscellaneous revenue are things like bases and plaques. But the majority of the $177,000 budgeted is just purchasing plots. And the expenses for the cemetery for fiscal year '24, repairs and maintenance. So we have that $100,000 set aside for operational maintenance, which we haven't done in quite a few years. And the capital for the entrance, which is $50,000, which is 22%. And then they have salaries of $46,000, which actually just goes towards landscaping to assist them with the grounds maintenance. That wraps up cemetery. So all the enterprise funds all the balances are currently positive with operational reserves as required. Utilities is in a process of a rate study, and revenues will be updated at the next meeting. And that's the end of the enterprise funds.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question, please.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in the process of receiving information on how and if and when and what Boulder City might do in reclaiming and either reusing or returning water. And I believe I understand correctly that you say if it's not budgeted for, we can't spend it in a budget cycle?
Oh, yes, but the enterprise funds are unique. They have different rules.
So would any expenses that we might incur in relation to that type of project be out of the enterprise account exclusively and no general fund?
In theory, you'd like the enterprise fund to pay for itself.
Okay. So, we talked a little bit about the fact that we have operational reserves, but they're being used each year. We're in a rate study currently. are the folks, doing the rate study given information that there may be these unknown?
They know, yes, all the information we know, we definitely, or the utilities team has definitely given to them, so they can analyze it and put it in their model.
So if we do in this, and who knows, how and when this is gonna occur, right? I'm not inferring anything to anybody in this meeting, but budget-wise, if we do in this fiscal year that's upcoming, incur any costs associated with that, are we gonna be able to fund those?
Depends
our
on
current
there's a
operational
lot of
reserves?
what-ifs in there.
Yeah, well,
If it depend on the cost.
I mean, that conceivably could
Mhm.
hold up a proceeding, right? If we don't have the operational reserves to allocate to that. Is that an accurate statement?
That would be accurate.
Okay, well, I guess that's all I really wanted to bring up there. Thanks, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
Thank you. So, do you want to go to the fiscal year 2024 schedule?
Yes. So, starting in the beginning, so the first week in February, the department's heads met with the city manager and myself to discuss their budgets and their needs. There is another group meeting with the directors on February 22nd, and here we are, March 8th, with our first official meeting, fiscal year 24. On the 23rd, we'll have our staff-led citizen workshop here in this building. Also on April 5th at the UAC meeting, we'll be presenting the budget there. And also on April 11th at the city council meeting, we'll be bringing the budget back to you. And on April 17th, I will file the tentative budget with the state. And then April 25th, we have a tentative budget meeting if needed. And May 16th, we'll publish the notice of the public hearing. And at the May 23rd council meeting, it'll be the adoption of the final budget and the adoption of this capital improvement program, and also adoption of the pay classification. And then by June 1st, it'll be mailed to the state for approval. And then June 21st, we'll publish a notice of summary that the final budget is available for inspection.
Questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Where on that timeline do we expect the rate study to be returned to us for review?
I know there is a joint workshop, and I cannot remember the day. The 26th of April?
April 26th, we expect to have that available to us. So I guess if we're looking at the timeline here, because that's when the deadline is for them to return that rate study to us for review. Is that what you're saying?
That's the workshop of them presenting it to the council on the April 26th.
Well, 25th is a budget meeting if needed, city council meeting, is that what
We
we're
could
referring?
change that date depending on I'll change that date. So it's the week after
Okay.
for the tentative, because after you'll get the presentation. That's a very good
Okay.
idea.
I mean, I think that's a pretty substantial piece of our budget that we
Yeah.
need a lot of time, and we'll probably receive a lot of public input on that particular item. So I just wanted to bring that up and just comment that for staff that we need to make sure we communicate that when that rate study's coming out, make it available, give the public the chance to review it, its potential implications, and that they're aware of what meeting it will be on the agenda so that we can engage the public in their comments with that. So, thanks. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes.
Just a point of clarification, so you say April 11th is the meeting?
It's at the same time as the city council meeting. So there'll be an agenda item for the budget at the city council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else that you want to do other than say thank you very much?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And that brings, so did we? Yes.
If I may indulge and have a moment at the podium?
I'm going to ask a question. Yes.
So, I think clarification, when I had mentioned earlier there was concerns about an open meeting law violation, it was not your open meeting, but it had to deal particularly with me in asking for a raise, and I wanted to make it clear, because I have a pecuniary interest in that. So I wanted to disclose that I'd have a pecuniary interest in asking for more money in my paycheck. So that request was made personally, not as my position as municipal judge. This is just the disclosure I needed to make.
Thank you, appreciate it. And we're all okay then? Thank you. And so.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I request a 5-minute recess, please?
You can request a 7.5-minute recess.
So requested.
Thank you. Go for it.
Somebody else would have caught you.
promise to be short and sweet.
Two on our agenda. With your mic on.
Item number 2 is the comprehensive fee schedule. So this is a presentation and possible staff direction on the master fee schedule. So when I first arrived at the city, I had asked around and asked for the fee schedule to see what we charge for all of our different fees and services. It's a handy document to have for any businesses or residents that are wanting to do business with the city, and we didn't have one place where they all were. So the finance department has worked with all of the department directors and all the various employees that have dealings with the fees. So we've proposed this new fee schedule, and I'm proud to report that the majority of the fees that are increasing are actually fees that would be charged to people that do not live in Boulder City. So that is a positivity attribute of this fee schedule. So I'll go ahead and turn this over to our real estate contracts manager, Brock Armentrout.
Thank you, City Manager, and good early evening, council members. I'm Brock Armentrout, your contracts real estate manager. As the city managers mentioned, this has been a process that has been over a year. Last year, we had presented a similar document, and we realized that we still had some more work to be done. And so we've done more work. What we're proposing to do is to consolidate all of our fees into a single process where annually they're reviewed and updated as necessary, or not updated, but still readopted each year with the budget cycle, so that we can have a comprehensive master fee schedule. The memo in your packet has 2 tables. The first one just highlights those fees that are proposed to be amended, whether it be reduced, eliminated, reclassified, or consolidated. And then the second table in your packet shows all those fees in context with the fees where there are no changes. They're staying the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But to let you see what those fees are in context with the fees that are being proposed to be amended. As you can imagine, the city, since we've been incorporated in 1960, we've adopted many different types of fee schedules. And over time, sometimes the fee schedule gets adopted and then never gets looked at again. The best example on our fee schedule is the bicycle license fee, adopted in 1972. Rumor is we still have the original license tags that they purchased in 1972. They still have a bunch of those to hand out. I'm not sure that they're all that sticky anymore, but we haven't changed the fee since the fee was adopted. Nowadays, no one really gets bicycle licenses, so that's one of our fees that we're proposing to eliminate in this revised fee schedule. Let you know what the process was. We worked with each individual department to compile all the fees that they collected and the enacting resolutions that created those fees. We had each department then suggest which fees they thought needed to be adjusted, whether up, down, eliminated, or consolidated, what have you, and to justify that need and provide any resources and research. Where they couldn't find the enacting resolutions, researched the city archives to find those elusive resolutions that adopted the initial fee, such as the bicycle license fee. And then we consolidated everything into a master fee schedule. We tried to color code it to make it easier for you to understand what was happening. If you see a lot of red, that's good. That's a fee the city's proposing to eliminate. Where you see purple, that is a fee that we're going to reclassify and possibly consolidate with other fees. Examples are in our photocopy charges. Because we had adopted the photocopy fee through multiple resolutions by different departments when they had their fees adopted, we have a wide variety of
fees being charged for the same thing. For a single photocopy, one department might charge 10 cents, another might charge 50, another might charge $1, another might charge $2. We're consolidating it into a single fee so that it's applied citywide to all departments with the exception of the municipal court, where their fees for copies are governed by Carson City. It's so that everyone charges the same fee, whether it be an 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17, or a large format print, as an example. Where we have created some new fees, it's for things that back in the 1990s when they created some of these fees, we didn't even know they existed. Like 1995, did you ever think we'd have a USB stick to photocopy or to copy electronic files on? It doesn't exist on a fee schedule, so this creates a fee. So if someone doesn't want an email to them, they want to have an electronic copy given to them on a little USB stick, we have a fee so that we can recover the city's costs and give them the files that they want on a USB stick, as an example. For the few of you who were here last year, you might remember I held up a stack of paper about this thick. That was the fire department fee schedule for plan review. And the reason it was that thick is because it was broken down in $100 increments. For a construction value of, for example, $1,000 to $1,100, you had to pay X fee. From $1,200 to $1,300, Y fee, and so on. And it went all the way down to $1 million. Well, we put our analysis hats on. I had to think real hard and remember what I learned in college, and use a little bit of Excel tricks, and we realized there's a formula. And so we created a formula, and now that big, thick fee schedule is now a table that's 4 lines in your fee schedule. So we've done things like that to make our fees easier for people to understand and calculate and comprehend. That said, if you have any questions on any specific fee, each department head is here. They can come and answer your questions for you. Or if you have no questions but wish to give direction, we're happy to receive direction. So when we come back in April, we can come back with answers or new fees or additional eliminated fees, whatever the case may be. And then the ultimate goal is at the May budget hearing, we would have a series of resolutions that would repeal the original enacting resolution for the current fee with a replacement resolution that would replace it with the new proposed fee. And in many cases, the new fee will be the exact same as the old fee, just with an up-to-date resolution. And that's where we're going to be at this point. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilman?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the fire chief, please.
Are you going to ask him if it's a good deal to have $125 for your whole family to guarantee that you can have an ambulance come and rescue you?
It's a great deal.
The BC Cares, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's a wonderful idea. Thanks for that plug for that plan. But my question specifically is to ask you, Chief, if you can please just elaborate for the benefit of the public.
Sure.
The ambulance fees.
Sure.
The transport fee, the jump there, what that means to the department, to the city, and to their potential pocketbook, if any.
Sure. So the goal is to align our fees with Clark County Fire, with the other fire departments in the valley. So Clark County Fire they set the fee, and I believe every fire department in Clark County except Boulder City and Mesquite, that's their fee. And so our goal was to better align it with that, because the cost of EMS costs the same in Boulder City as it does in Vegas and Henderson. So for years, we've been charging a couple $100s when we're not recovering anywhere near what it's costing us to do that service. And so our goal was to try to align it with that. So that is where it's at. And with the subscription program, like you talked about, there's a process in place, a very, very affordable process to be able to avoid those fees for up to 2 transports per individual in the household. So, I mean, if a person's concerned, that's a really inexpensive option to avoid that fee. And we actually are starting to see more participation in that program.
Thank you. Follow-up, is most or all of that new fee covered by, say, Medicare or many of the insurance programs? Is there some information we have on that?
I could get you that information. I know Medicaid tends to pay a very small fee, but if you're on Medicaid, Medicaid pays what they pay, and that's it. The individual doesn't get billed anything. So it was, a couple years ago, it was about $128. That's what you get. Now, where the Medicaid and Medicare do pay is the mileage. They will pay that. So when we're transporting to Boulder City, it's a mile. When we're going to UMC, it's 25 miles. So they'll pay that one way. So that is a little bit of increase. Medicare is a little bit better. And then private pay, the individual would either pay the fee or they would have the subscription program. And then insurance, again, it's all different, the collection rates by the insurance companies. So we don't have contracts, to my understanding, with any of the insurance companies. So like certain ambulances will negotiate a fee with like Kaiser Permanente, and they'll say, hey, we'll do all your transports, you pay us $400. We don't do that. The Boulder City doesn't have that situation, so.
Typically, right, we see most of our transports in the elderly community, particularly Boulder City. So we want to ensure that the impact is as minimal as possible on them, since they're generally the audience that receives that service. So I'm glad to hear that we have, the supplemental fee. Medicaid, then, to clarify, pays what they pay and the individual isn't billed at all.
Correct.
And Medicare, then there's some shared cost there, and we're not sure what the percentage is.
I can get that percentage if you would like me to bring it back.
I think the public would really be interested in that, for sure.
I'll call our billing company.
But also, with that follow-up, and I'm glad the mayor brought up the subscription service for ambulance. I mean, that's certainly a way to avoid the sticker shock and the insult to injury after being injured and needing transport to receive a bill. And that subscription really helps offset that.
It does, and to be clear how it works, and so if you have a particular insurance, and let's say your bill is an advanced life support, so advanced life support 2 is a very rare call. That's a cardiac arrest, that's the most extreme call. We transport you, everything works out well. We would bill your insurance, they pay what they pay, and the rest is waived. And so the individual's portion doesn't get paid. So if you have a large copay of $5,000, your whole bill's waived. If you're just responsible for a few hundred, that's waived. Whatever your portion is waived for 2 per person.
Thank you. I just wanted to address that fee. That's, I think, substantial for our demographic here in town. So that's all I had, Chief. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Like so many of the larger cities, why don't we contract with a ambulance company to transport for us? Because it seems to me like having our guys just transporting is, when we could have them here for health or safety, would be much more important.
Sure. I believe actually one of the council members attempted that when he was the interim fire chief. The concern is when you contract with them, so private ambulances are strictly a business. And so they're not gonna park 3 ambulances over here, because there's sometimes when we'll have 4 calls at the same time, but quite often we have 1 or 2. And so every time they have an ambulance parked here that's not running a call, they're not making any money. Those same exact ambulances in Henderson and Las Vegas will go from call to hospital to call all day. So they lose money when they're parking here. So we would likely have to pay them to park an ambulance out here, and then they would have an ambulance out here. So when that ambulance gets a call, they'll leave, and then when they get a free one, they'll send it back. So the level of service would decline. So last year we had 400, actually in 2021 we had 498 concurrent calls. So we needed 2 ambulances at least at the same exact time. They wouldn't be here. So the level of service would sharply decline.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I would accept a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I had a problem downloading the whole fee schedule on my computer, so I didn't get as thorough of a review that I wanted to get, but I'd like to ask our Public Works, generally speaking, because not having had the chance to see if there's any big bumps in any fees or anything, I'll just ask a general question and you can address it. Are the fee schedules that we have proposed here more friendly towards our businesses and residents?
More streamlined,
more streamlined, easier to understand, and not increasing so high that it's going to be a cost passed down in construction costs because the fees have increased so substantially, or any such thing?
So there are some increases, but there's also some that we've combined and decreased as well. So there's no substantial increases, but yeah, everything that we're doing and have done in the past is trying to become more friendly, more efficient. So to answer your question, no tremendous increases, but there are some, but we also have decreased in some areas.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. That was a general question I had, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
Yeah, it can be a motion, Mr. Mayor. Let me read what they're asking us to do. I will make a motion that we continue with, and now this is part of the budget process, right? So this will just be added to the budget process, so that we accept this as part of our budget proposal with the master fee schedule.
Second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Jorgensen. And any discussion? See no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay. Unanimous. Thank you. And we will now move to number 3. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Bryce Bolt, our Administrative Services Director, will be handling this item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Good
Bolt.
afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Bryce Bolt, Administrative Services Director. In the employment agreements with the city attorney, city manager, and city clerk call for performance evaluations on or around March 15th each year. The third item on your agenda today is discussion and provide direction on determining an appropriate performance review and measure method. In the staff report, I've included the applicable contract language, which outlines the requirements for evaluation method. I've also included a number of examples of employee performance evaluation tools, to include the city's employee performance review tool, performance evaluation tools used last year for these positions, the City of Las Vegas appointed employee performance appraisal form, and 2 performance evaluation presentations used by the City of Henderson. And I stand ready to facilitate the discussion and look forward to the determination.
Thank you. I know that Councilman Walton has made this somewhat of a handout for us, and maybe he can say how he feels and what he suggests.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regardless of what format we choose, I asked the city clerk to include the blue front page form, which is titled Talent Management Success Factors. And you'll see on the X and the Y axes, there's from operational employee to strategic employee, from talent and capability development. And so I found great success and potential in employee development, being objective in development of performance review and the ability to coach and develop employees using this model. And if you'll go through the pages, you'll see that each definition or each competency, if you will, foundational or core success factor, has several definitions. And that was really the key, self-confidence, interpersonal savvy, on down the line from page to page. And I found that utilizing these as a general framework and then fitting it into the specifics of the employee's job description or their general job expectation led to very objective outcomes for the categories and the definitions of how I rated employees. So that's why I included that there. We can use any number of the formats that council would like to use. I included a format from City of Henderson that I sought there, and there are others that Mr. Bolt included that could also work, and we could also take some of the general classifications from those. I just found, from my personal experience in municipal government, that objectivity and accountability were rare factors in evaluations, and this helped lead to that. And you'll see across the top on page 1 that you have professional and technical level, which is the dark blue. The medium blue is supervisory or division level, and then on the far right in the lighter blue, director and city manager level. So as you turn the page and you find the different colors, they're more leadership and strategic thinking oriented as you look at the core success factors. So I would submit that we skip most of the dark blue and medium blue if you're going to look at this handout, and go to the last couple pages, which are the light blue, which are more of that level of employee that we're considering here: city manager, city clerk, and city attorney. And there's a lot to digest here. I can't imagine that we would digest all of it in great detail, but Mr. Mayor, as you asked, that's my explanation.
Thank you. Any comments? Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I really like what Mr. Council Member Walton presented there, because it kind of helps you. I like the forms that's in the book that the city provides, but what Council Member Walton has provided gives you a little bit of summary to read why you're answering that question. So I like the plus and minus, and being able to come up and after you answer all the questions, to be able to have a number factor there of how you rated that person. So that gives you a little bit better idea of how you really feel about that person. Maybe you can give, and it gives you a way to also give some recommendations on the form. So I like these two handouts together myself. That's all I have to say.
So if I could ask the question, who fills out the forms?
That is a very good question, because the evaluation is by the council, and not necessarily every council member. So in the past, council has, last year, for example, the appointeds made a presentation, council graded, made comments, scored. We took those 5 and scurried back to the large conference room and condensed those into one document. All comments were included, and the average of the numeric scores was provided on one document, and that became the council's evaluation. It came back and was presented as such and voted as such.
I guess that's why I like shorter
Right.
better than longer. And I looked at the one that the city of Boulder City has, which is shorter. And, you know, it's a numerical 1 to 5, and then it, for our purposes as a council getting together in one room and going over that, it basically addresses much of what any form does, but it is a little more facile, I guess, than the multiple colored ones that Councilman Walton has showed us. So I like shorter and easier when we get in a room and try to look at it. So I'm trying to put my head around the yellows and the blues.
Mr. Mayor, can
As
I
a
ask you a
group.
question?
Go ahead.
As we look at, and I'm taking your, I just pulled up the performance evaluation sample that Boulder City has for the city manager. Are you looking at a specific one or a generic one that was just the?
So I've got the city attorney one, but I'm going back to this one, which is the employee performance review. And then I've got the city attorney performance evaluation. And then I've got the city manager performance evaluation, each one unique for the position, but they're basically similar in their looking at similar kinds of things. And
Right. So, I would I would ask or submit the opportunity that we compare some of the, and I don't know, like I said, I don't think it can all be done today. There's a lot of information to digest, but I think we understand that the last time a review was done, it was quirky at best. And to simplify this, but I think there's value in looking at each heading. For example, number 1 on the city manager was individual characteristics, number 2, professional skills, status, etc. And comparing some of the light blue headings to see if some of these and then looking at the specific definitions, if we like any that are more clarifying or more specific that suits our purpose or not. And what we have in place may be perfect, and I accept that that may be the case as well. I'm not recommending a change per se, but that we at least review and evaluate that it's currently what we want to have.
So I'm going to ask a question of staff. I think we do need to have a performance review and measure, and we have to have some method to do it. And so Councilman Walton obviously has taken it upon himself to actually do work. And I'm wondering if we wouldn't be wise to allow him to come back to the next city council meeting, whichever one is appropriate, and report to us what he's found and what he would think would be the most apt to be appropriate for what we're doing.
Council can certainly do that. I would just point out, for timing purposes, the evaluations per our contract say they occur around March. So,
This is March.
yeah. So I don't know if council wants to continue with the current method while exploring a future method, or what council wishes to do. Or you can pick a method right here. It's up to the city council, ultimately.
Well, this is March, and we have something that we've done before.
And Mr. Mayor, I will add, so our reviews are scheduled for the 21st of March, right?
Yes, there's a special meeting for the reviews, March 21st, and I was just going to mention.
Did we bring it back on the 28th? I mean, the 14th? Yeah, if I amend the agenda by tomorrow morning before 9.
Yes. Go ahead, be on. Yeah.
Okay.
Go, put it on. Turn on your mic.
I wanted to clarify my statement because I'm in agreement with you in the sense of this is the form to use. What I thought this was a good tool, what Steve brought in, I thought was a good tool to help with, if you were struggling with one of these answers, to refer to this pamphlet here. So I am in agreement with using the tool that the city currently has. But I liked what Steve brought in, Mr. Councilmember Walton brought in to help me make decisions on some of the answers. That's what I was trying to state.
Councilwoman Jorgensen.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple things that I look at here. I know that we used this last year, and this was one of the tools, and then we all filled it out, and you left and you did a cumulative, basically. So you took all of the comments, you took all of the scores from the individuals as they filled them out and did one cumulative score. I hear you saying if we were all in a room filling one out. So I don't know if we are looking at the process itself, like are we going to fill one out together as a group? Are we going to fill 5 out and then have them brought back together in one reporting if we chose to use this tool? So I see that we're also looking at the tool we're choosing to use, but also are we looking at the process of how we're going to use that tool?
Yeah, and tool and method, and that might be part of the method.
Just one thing to add, so everything has to occur here in open meeting. There would be no room involved with filling out one form, so you would be doing it from the dais.
So I'm more comfortable filling out my own personal one with my own personal comments, as long as I know that they're all included. In the past, we've used this, and I could see the tool that you've brought today would be a tool that would be good at helping us to make decisions. And if we have this in front of us, we can look at this over time to decide how we interpret this ourselves in relation to the employee. So I'm not sure we have time to do a full overhaul of this current one, implementing portions of this with what we have here with the timeline that we currently have. So I myself am comfortable with what we currently have, then, and if in the future we would like to maybe initiate some changes in it, doing that far in advance of the evaluation so that we have time to vet it appropriately.
Councilman Fox.
Perfectly said. So yeah, I'd go with the same one we used last year as well.
So as I hear this, I'm trying to see what you did. You filled each form out, the existing form, individually, and then came in open meeting and shared what that was.
In the open meeting.
You-
We filled those, they did a presentation, we were given the evaluations, we filled out the evaluations in that open meeting right then. Then they took those and they did calculations outside of the area, council area, and then brought that back with, I can't remember exactly, did you bring that back immediately, or was that brought back after the 3 presentations?
So first presentation, then we went back, well, the second presentation, so there was some, and it's the average score per item.
And then you brought the first one back, and then
Yeah.
we made a decision on the first one, and then it went on?
I believe what occurred, so after each presentation, you did the scoring. And so HR staff went to the other room while the next person was presenting. They scored it, then that next person's sheets went back, they scored those. Then the third employee provided the presentation, that was scored. And then once you had the cumulative scores at the end, it was, you went one by one on the employees, gave them feedback, and then provided the adjustments.
So what I'm hearing is you would like to make a motion to do what we did last time.
I move, because of the timeline that we're currently under, that we should, I mean, if I'm looking at all of this, I'm most comfortable with what we currently have been using. So yes, I move that we use the evaluation tool that we used last year in this year's evaluations.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, discussion.
With that said, I also would like to give some, I don't know, direction or something, or some thought process that maybe we could look at this later on to be able to say, and maybe even immediately afterwards, to do some evaluation of this and decide if that felt like an effective tool this time. Now we'll have used it twice. If it feels like an effective tool and we want to implement any changes.
So the motion is to do what we did last time, and there has been a second, and is there any other discussion?
Yes.
Go for it.
I agree with that. I think as long as our minds are on the evaluation, the tool, the process, let's continue that momentum, and we can even use the experience of using this one to guide us in any changes we might want. So I'd request, as as Councilmember Jorgensen had mentioned, that we keep it on the agenda when we address these as continued discussion about the process and tool. I guess I have a question is, from the feedback, it sounds like the process was difficult, I don't know what the right word is, so what do we need to change in the process this time to make it smooth, more smooth, better, less uncomfortable, whatever the description of that would be?
Am I to understand that you must fill out the tool at the meeting? You could not do it ahead of the meeting and have that?
I don't know that that's a
available.
requirement, that you had to fill it out at the meeting.
Would that change the process?
You could fill them out beforehand, and, I think you could either give them to me, I think at the meeting I could get them. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, if I could get them prior to that. If I could get all evaluations prior to the meeting, come up with a cumulative average score, bring the comments together into one document for council to review that day as part of their evaluation.
It would
I'm-
feel to me, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I might.
Go ahead.
It would feel to me that if we filled them out beforehand, it would almost make their presentations at the meeting
Mhm.
moot, right? Because I'm sure that part of the presentation, not only to present to the public what they've accomplished and how wonderful their performance has been, but to sway the evaluation to a more positive
Right.
tilt, right? So, while we may be able to, it kind of feels like it would be a little bit of the cart before the horse in that case, because we wouldn't get their perspective on their performance until that meeting. And then on second question, using this, I'm neater at typing a response than I am at writing a response in a short time frame. Can this be created in a fillable format so that it could be pulled up on the computer while we're in the meeting rather than have to
Yeah.
handwrite it?
In fact, that was going through my head, if I could get it electronic in some way, then the equation to come up with the average score would be quicker. I'll just have to look at that. I can certainly get a fillable PDF that we can send to a local printer,
Right.
and I can get those documents at the worst, at least we could do that. If others wanted to type them in too, or handwritten, either way. But if I could get them all electronic where the equations would be figured out, then I could play solitaire all day. But I'd have to look at that document and see if I could get an equation set up to do that. But at worst, you could certainly put it on that. I think we could send it to a local printer and have it printed out, and then we'd do our average scores.
Would the maker of the motion like to amend the motion in any way?
I had one question though, yeah.
Would the maker of the motion like to amend the motion?
No.
The motion was we would do it the same thing as it was done before. It was seconded, and
Now I can-
now discussion.
Thank you, I'm learning. My feeling on it is, I want to do the very best I can on these evaluations, and I would like to do them ahead of time myself, so that I have time to really sit down and think and give them all the time that I feel is necessary to do their evaluation. Because to me, coming in and filling out an evaluation very quickly is a little tough, but if you had it on a computer here, could we fill the form out ahead of time so I could just go over? Because I would like to spend some time at home, and is that not okay to do? Is that out of the open meeting law, or could we do something like that?
Well, nothing precludes us from thinking and writing our thoughts down before we come to a meeting.
Okay.
That's when we share them that becomes
Okay.
problematic.
So I could fill the form out ahead of time, yes.
We will probably know what the form is, but the form that you will fill out will be when we're supposed to fill it out and where we're supposed to fill it out. So you can do your own thought process
Okay.
whenever you
I
want.
think I got it.
That's looking for nods.
Well, Mayor, just as a disclosure to make, this does impact me in my personal capacity, as it could determine compensation. So that would have a pecuniary interest, so I do want to disclose that. So I will say, as a general concept, you are you are prohibited by open meeting law from deliberating outside of open meeting. You may form your own thoughts and opinions about any agenda item yourself and bring those thoughts with you to the meeting. So just as a general concept.
And I would like to also disclose the same disclosure that the city attorney just made.
And I would also like to disclose my pecuniary interest in this matter as it could affect my personal capacity. However, yes, the forms are in the packet in front of you. I have seen other cities where I've worked before where they did hand them out ahead of time, but you have the forms so you know what will be asked. I will say that I think our presentations will be exciting, and but that will be on the 21st. So
Yes.
Just to share with your concerns, Councilwoman Booth, and with your concerns, Councilman Walton, about not seeing the presentation, about being prepared. I in the past did both. So this is it. What you see is what we get. And so in looking at that, had an idea, filled it out, came here, listened, changed what I felt needed to be changed, and then transcribed it onto my official form and had my thoughts. So did both.
Any other comments before we vote? Go ahead.
I'd like to have the discussion and maybe some staff input. I'd like to know if each of these evaluation tools hits the mark in the opinion of each employee who's being evaluated. I haven't, like I said, I haven't had the chance to review it, and I know we don't give the keys to the hen house to the fox, right? And that's not what I'm implying by asking the employees who are being evaluated, but oftentimes there are particular line items that really don't have that much to do with what they do specifically. Or there might be a better way to evaluate it that they would recommend to us because of the interactions they have on different levels with different internal or external customers, as a couple of examples. And so I guess I'm not asking for a change in the motion because we need to proceed and we need to be timely and we don't have a lot of agenda lead time to get ahead of that. But I guess I made that statement maybe a little ahead of what we intend or might intend to do in keeping the momentum and discussing this going forward. But part of the question is, how can we do that since it's all open meeting law required, right? How do we get input from staff separate from their evaluation on the specific items and their applicability to their specific job or what they might think is a better statement or approach? That was a question.
So the question is, how do we give staff input, in essence, or help them grow and develop as well as help them understand where we're coming from? Individually, we can do that through the city manager if it's regular staff not appointed, but and we probably have to have that clarification done. I think that is a excellent question that you can put on the agenda for discussion for another meeting, and we can do it that way. There is a motion and a second on the floor. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Ayes have it. It is unanimous. That is the last thing we have on our agenda except for public comment. Anybody who wishes to have public comment, come forward. And if you want to start calling in now, you can call the phone number of 702-589-9629, and be ready for when we call on you. Go ahead.
Roseanne Rabiola Bailey, and I think the first budget meeting I ever went to was in 1999. I have not gone to every single budget meeting. They used to be at 7 o'clock in the morning. I had to go when I was writing for the paper. I thought we had another person from the public here, but that's Mr. Evans from the newspaper. And it makes me feel sad that people moan and groan and complain, and they don't come to meetings. And I also understand this started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I also understand we have lots of people in Boulder City who aren't doing anything at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That would prevent them from coming to a budget meeting that they're going to really be upset about. On the other hand, I would like to see council and staff talk to people in the community. I've been moaning and groaning about town hall meetings for a long time. I want to see council members and staff go out to restaurants, the multipurpose building, not have an agendized meeting. Staff can go out and talk. Public Works Director can go out and talk. Joe Stubitz can go out and talk. The city manager can go out and talk. Everybody can go. Tammy can go out and talk. Brittany, everybody can go on. There's so many people who are on staff who could tell people in the city what they do. Do they know who runs landscaping? Do they know who sweeps the streets? Do they know who climbs the electric poles? Who reads meters? I saw a video with Ralph Nader. Boy, does he look good, and he's about 84 or 85 years old right now. Ralph Nader said, and boy, do I believe him, he said, when you want to influence somebody, you go face to face and you look them in the eye. We talk about priorities. What are our priorities? Oh, transparency, let's smile. People in this town don't know a lot of stuff because nobody tells them. That's one thing. And they don't read about it. I was really happy to go with Phil Henry, who was Public Works Director, and walk around and look at cracks in the asphalt and go over to the landfill, and he'd show me this and he'd show me that. And Ned Shamo would talk to me about the prices of electricity. And they even took me up in a helicopter one time when they were building the Tillman Bridge. And I got a chance to learn lots of stuff. It was my job, it was my life. And I'm not going anywhere, so I want to learn a lot of things. And I'd like to see everybody tell the rest of the folks that what you guys know. That's all. I'll put my name.
Thank you. If there's anyone else come forward or anybody on the line, see none. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.